She was just a janitor, the kind of person people walk past without even noticing. Every morning before the sun came up, she cleaned the marble floors of a hotel she could never afford to stay in. People dropped trash at her feet and never even said thank you. But what they didn't know was that this woman spoke 6 languages. She had a business degree from one of the best universities in the country. And one day, fate decided to remind the world exactly who she was. When a powerful billionaire arrived and everything started to fall apart, the woman they all ignored, the one they called just a janitor, stepped forward and changed her life forever. This is the story of Maya Rodriguez, the invisible woman who finally made the world see her. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you are watching from. Let me tell you a story that will break your heart before it lifts your spirit. It's about a woman named Maya Rodriguez, and it takes place in a grand hotel in downtown Chicago called the Sterling Grand. This story is about what happens when we judge people by what we see on the outside, and how sometimes the universe has a way of making things right. Maya was 28 years old, and every morning she woke up at 3 o'clock while the rest of the city was still sleeping. By 5 in the morning, she was already 2 hours into her shift at the Sterling Grand, pushing her cleaning cart through marble hallways that cost more than most people's homes. She wore a simple gray uniform, and if you walked past her, you probably wouldn't even notice she was there. That's how invisible she had become. For 3 long years, Maya had worked as a janitor at this luxury hotel. 3 years of scrubbing toilets, mopping floors, and wiping down surfaces that wealthy guests barely glanced at. 3 years of being treated like she was part of the furniture. Guests would have entire conversations right in front of her, talking about their million-dollar deals and exotic vacations, never once thinking that the quiet woman with the mop might understand every word they said. But here's what nobody knew about Maya Rodriguez. She had a degree from Northwestern University. Not just any degree, but one in international business and languages. She had graduated at the top of her class, and she could speak 6 languages fluently: English, Spanish, French, German, Mandarin, and Russian. Her professors had told her she had a brilliant future ahead of her. They said she would change the world. So how did someone so talented end up cleaning hotel rooms? The answer is simple, and it's the same answer that explains so many hard choices in this world: love. Maya's mother got sick. Cancer. Stage 3. The kind that requires treatments so expensive they can bankrupt a family. Maya had been job hunting, waiting for the right position in international business, when that phone call came. Her mother needed help immediately, not in 3 months when some fancy consulting firm finished their hiring process. So Maya took the first job that offered same-day pay and health insurance. She walked into the Sterling Grand on a Tuesday afternoon and walked out with a janitor's uniform. She told herself it would be temporary, just until her mother got better. That was 3 years ago. The worst part wasn't the physical work. Maya didn't mind hard work. The worst part was how she was treated by the hotel's assistant manager, a woman named Patricia Whitmore. Patricia was the kind of person who measured her own importance by making others feel small. She had an office with a fancy desk and a degree from a good school hanging on her wall, and she never let anyone forget it. Patricia seemed to have a special kind of cruelty reserved just for Maya. Every single day brought new humiliations. Maya, you're moving too slowly. Our guests pay $2,000 a night. They don't want to see you shuffling around like you have all day. Or, Maya, make sure you stay out of sight when important clients arrive. You know what I mean. And Maya did know what she meant. She understood perfectly. There was one person at the hotel who treated Maya like a human being. His name was Daniel Torres, the night security supervisor. Daniel was 56 years old, and he'd worked in Chicago hotels for most of his life. He had kind eyes and a gentle way of speaking that made you feel like you mattered. You're different from the others, Daniel told Maya one morning. I can see it. I don't know what your story is, but I can tell you're not supposed to be here. Maya appreciated his kindness, but she couldn't tell him the truth. She couldn't tell anyone. Because if Patricia found out that Maya had a Northwestern degree, if she discovered that Maya spoke 6 languages, it would somehow make the humiliation worse. Patricia would find a way to use it against her, to make her feel even smaller. So Maya stayed quiet. She kept her head down. She cleaned her assigned rooms and tried to make herself as invisible as possible. Every night she went home to the small apartment she shared with her mother, who was slowly getting better thanks to the health insurance Maya's job provided. And every night, Maya told herself that the sacrifice was worth it. But something was happening inside her. With every insult Patricia threw at her, with every time a guest looked right through her like she didn't exist, something was breaking. It wasn't her spirit exactly. Maya's spirit was strong, but it was her sense of self. She was disappearing, even to herself. The confident woman who had once given presentations to rooms full of professors was fading away, replaced by someone who apologized for taking up space. Maya had no way of knowing that everything was about to change. She had no idea that in just a few hours, her entire life would be turned upside down. She didn't know that the worst day of her working life would become the best day of her entire existence. Sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. Sometimes the very moment when we feel most invisible is the moment right before the world finally sees us. And sometimes the people who try hardest to keep us down end up being the ones who lift us up, even if they never meant to. This is Maya's story. And I promise you, by the end of it, you'll believe in second chances again. The morning of September 15th started like any other morning at the Sterling Grand. Maya was polishing the brass railings in the lobby when she noticed unusual activity. Extra security guards were taking positions around the entrance. Hotel staff were rushing around with clipboards and worried expressions. Fresh flowers were being arranged for the third time. Something big was happening. Richard Pemberton, the hotel manager, appeared in the lobby wearing his best suit. Richard was the kind of man who smiled with his mouth, but never with his eyes. He was all about appearances, about making sure everything looked perfect on the surface, even if it was falling apart underneath. And right now, Richard looked like a man who was trying very hard not to panic. Patricia Whitmore was right behind him, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Maya had never seen her assistant manager look so stressed. Patricia's usual air of superiority had been replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Everything must be absolutely perfect, Patricia was saying to anyone who would listen. Dmitry Volkov doesn't give second chances. If anything goes wrong, if there's even the smallest mistake. She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Jobs were on the line. Maya kept cleaning, but she was listening carefully. She'd heard the name Dmitry Volkov before, during her university studies. He was a Russian energy billionaire, one of the most powerful businessmen in Eastern Europe. If he was coming to the Sterling Grand, it meant serious money was about to change hands. At exactly 10:15 in the morning, the hotel's revolving doors began to spin. First came the security team, 20 men in dark suits who moved through the lobby like a military operation. They positioned themselves at every exit, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Then he walked in. Dmitry Volkov was not a tall man, but he commanded attention like he owned the building. At 53 years old, he moved with the confidence of someone who had built an empire from nothing. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his dark eyes missed absolutely nothing. When he spoke in rapid Russian to his assistant, every hotel employee within earshot suddenly became very busy. Richard stepped forward with his biggest smile. "Welcome to the Sterling Grand, Mr. Volkov. Everything has been prepared exactly as you requested." But Volkov didn't respond in English. He continued speaking Russian to his assistant, a thin, nervous man who was typing frantically on his phone. Maya, still polishing the same brass railing she'd been working on for the past 10 minutes, understood every single word. "Tell them we have limited time," Volkov was saying in Russian, his tone sharp. "If they cannot provide proper translation services, we will take our business elsewhere. The energy contracts need to be finalized today." Patricia's phone buzzed. Maya watched as the assistant manager's face went completely white. Patricia grabbed Richard's arm and pulled him aside, but Maya could still hear every word. "Richard, Sarah Mitchell was in a car accident. She's in the hospital. She can't come." Sarah Mitchell was the Sterling Grand's Russian translator, the woman they'd specifically hired for international guests. Richard's face showed pure panic. "Call the backup translator. We have contingency plans for exactly this." Patricia was already scrolling through her phone, her hands shaking. "I'm trying. James Parker has COVID and is quarantined. And Elena Petrov," she declined. "She said she doesn't feel comfortable working with certain Russian businessmen." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Elena had researched Dmitry Volkov and decided the risk wasn't worth any amount of money. Maya continued her work, but her attention was completely focused on the unfolding disaster. She could hear Volkov's growing impatience as he spoke to his assistant in Russian. "These Americans promise efficiency but deliver chaos. Perhaps we should reconsider our investment entirely. Patricia was making increasingly desperate phone calls, her voice rising with each rejection. What do you mean you can't be here in an hour? This is the Sterling Grand Hotel. Richard was pacing now, sweat forming on his forehead despite the perfect air conditioning. How long until someone can get here? The earliest anyone can arrive is 3 o'clock, maybe 4. 4 o'clock. Richard's voice cracked. The energy company representatives arrive at 2. If we delay this meeting, we lose everything. Everything. Maya knew exactly what everything meant. She'd overheard enough conversations over the past 3 years to understand the hotel's financial situation. The Sterling Grand looked beautiful on the outside, but inside it was struggling. This deal with Volkov wasn't just business. It was survival. Without it, there would be layoffs, budget cuts, and possibly the end of the hotel's reputation in international business circles. Volkov's assistant approached Richard with barely concealed frustration. Mr. Volkov is considering alternative arrangements. Perhaps the Four Seasons would be better equipped to handle sensitive international negotiations. The words hit Richard like a physical blow. Losing a client like Volkov to their biggest competitor would be a humiliation the hotel might never recover from. Please, Patricia stepped forward, and for the first time in 3 years, Maya heard genuine desperation in her voice. Give us just a few more minutes. We're resolving this situation. But they weren't resolving anything. Maya watched as Patricia made call after call, each conversation ending in failure. No available translators. No solutions. No hope. Volkov was now speaking more rapidly to his assistant, his body language shifting from impatience to active irritation. Maya could read the cultural cues that the hotel staff was missing. In Russian business culture, this kind of incompetence wasn't just inconvenient. It was insulting. It was a sign of disrespect. Daniel appeared at Maya's side, his security instincts picking up on the tension. This doesn't look good, he murmured quietly. Whatever's happening, management is about to lose their minds. Maya nodded, her heart beating faster. She could solve this entire problem in 30 seconds. But the very idea was absurd. She was a janitor, invisible by design, whose opinion had never been sought on anything more important than which cleaning supplies to use. Volkov's assistant was preparing to deliver what was clearly a final message. The Russian delegation was heading toward the door, taking millions of dollars in contracts with them. And that's when something inside Maya Rodriguez finally broke free. Maya took one step forward. Just one single step toward the crisis unfolding in front of her. But it was enough. Patricia's head snapped around like a predator spotting prey. Her face, already flushed with panic, twisted into something ugly and cruel. What do you think you're doing? Patricia's voice cut through the marble lobby like a knife, loud enough to make several guests turn and stare. Maya froze, her cleaning cloth still in her hand. You were eavesdropping on a private business conversation, Patricia snapped, striding toward Maya with aggressive energy that made everyone uncomfortable. Do you have any idea how inappropriate that is? The accusation hit Maya like a slap. She felt her cheeks burn with humiliation as conversations around the lobby began to quiet. Guests and staff alike turned to witness what was clearly about to become a public spectacle. Miss Whitmore, I wasn't eavesdropping. I was doing my job. Your job. Patricia's voice rose even higher. Your job is to clean toilets and empty trash cans. Your job is to stay invisible when important people are conducting business. Dmitry Volkov had paused near the elevator, watching the confrontation with growing disapproval. He couldn't understand the English words, but the body language was universal. This was someone with power abusing someone who had none. Maya felt the familiar burning sensation rising in her chest. The same feeling she'd experienced countless times over the past 3 years when her dignity was stripped away piece by piece. But this time something was different. This time there was a solution to a real problem being ignored because of who she was. Miss Whitmore, please. I understand you're under stress. Don't you dare tell me about stress. Patricia exploded, stepping so close she invaded Maya's personal space. You have no idea what real responsibility feels like. You push a mop around and collect a paycheck. That's the extent of your contribution to this establishment. The words were designed to wound, and they found their target. Maya's hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from the force of trying to contain her response. Richard appeared at Patricia's shoulder, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. Patricia, perhaps we should focus on the situation at hand. I am handling the situation, Patricia snapped back. Part of handling VIP guests properly is making sure the help knows their place. The word help landed like a bomb. Maya felt something crack inside her chest. She looked around the lobby and saw the faces of other staff members. Some sympathetic, others carefully neutral. All of them relieved they weren't the target. Daniel had appeared at the edge of the scene, his instincts telling him things were escalating beyond professional boundaries. But even he was powerless to intervene without risking his own job. You know what your problem is? Patricia continued, her voice now loud enough that even Volkov's security team was paying attention. You people always think you're entitled to be involved in things that are way above your pay grade. The phrase "you people" hung in the air like poison. Everyone in the lobby understood exactly what Patricia meant. Maya felt her vision blur slightly, not from tears but from pure rage building behind her careful mask. Her mother's words echoed in her memory. Baby, sometimes you have to bite your tongue to survive, but never let them believe their lies about who you are. I apologize if I've caused any confusion, Maya said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. I'll return to my duties. But Patricia wasn't finished. The stress, the panic, the audience, it had all created a perfect storm of cruelty. Oh, you'll return to your duties all right, Patricia said, her voice dripping with malicious satisfaction. But first, let me make something crystal clear. She gestured at the assembled crowd like she was giving a presentation. This person represents everything wrong with modern service standards. No respect for hierarchy, no understanding of boundaries. She pointed directly at Maya. You want to know what your contribution to this crisis has been? You've been a distraction. While I'm trying to solve a complex international business problem, I have to waste time managing cleaning staff who don't know their place. Maya felt something fundamental shift inside her. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a kind of crystal-clear certainty that cut through years of submission and self-doubt. Volkov was speaking urgently to his assistant in Russian. Maya understood every word. This is exactly the kind of disrespectful workplace culture that makes me question doing business with American companies. They treat their own employees like garbage. You know what the real tragedy is here? Patricia's voice had taken on fake sympathy that was worse than her open hostility. You actually think you could have helped with this situation. You think because you've overheard a few conversations while emptying trash cans, you understand international business. She laughed, a sound without warmth. Let me explain something about the real world. Important people like Mr. Volkov don't waste their time talking to the cleaning lady. They need professionals. People with degrees and credentials and actual experience. They need someone who belongs in their world, not someone who, Patricia paused, her eyes scanning Maya from her uniform to her worn work shoes. Not someone who looks like they just stepped off the street. The final insult landed with devastating precision. It wasn't about Maya's job or her education. It was about her race, her appearance, her fundamental right to be seen as a human being worthy of respect. The lobby fell into complete silence. Even Volkov had stopped his private conversation, sensing something significant was happening. Maya felt her hands unclench. Her racing heart suddenly slowed to a steady, determined rhythm. The burning in her chest transformed into cold, clear resolve. She looked at Patricia, then at Richard, then at the Russian delegation preparing to walk out forever. She thought about her mother in recovery, about 3 years of invisible servitude, about talents systematically ignored and dismissed. And then Maya Rodriguez made a decision that would change everything. Miss Whitmore, she said quietly, her voice carrying a new quality that made everyone turn toward her. Before you finish destroying this negotiation completely, there's something you should know. Patricia's eyes widened in shock. In 3 years, Maya had never challenged her authority, never spoken back, never done anything but accept whatever abuse came her way. Excuse me? Patricia's voice was dangerous now. Maya took a deep breath, feeling 3 years of silence lifting from her shoulders. I said there's something you should know about the solution to your problem. About why Mr. Volkov is about to walk out that door and never come back. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the Sterling Grand understood that whatever happened next would change everything. The silence that followed Maya's words was so complete you could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Patricia's face cycled through shock, rage, and something approaching panic as she realized her authority was being questioned in front of the most important guest in the hotel's history. How dare you? Patricia's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried pure venom. How dare you speak to me that way? But Maya was no longer the invisible janitor who had spent 3 years accepting abuse in silence. Something fundamental had shifted inside her. When she spoke again, her voice carried an authority no one at the Sterling Grand had ever heard from her before. "Miss Whitmore, with all due respect, you've just spent the last 10 minutes publicly humiliating me in front of everyone here," Maya said, her tone calm but unwavering. "You've made assumptions about my intelligence, my education, and my qualifications based on nothing more than the color of my skin and the uniform I wear." Several guests shifted uncomfortably, finally understanding the true nature of what they'd been witnessing. This wasn't just a workplace dispute. It was something far more serious. Patricia's face flushed even deeper. "You are completely out of line. Richard, call security. Have this person removed immediately." But Richard was staring at Maya with a puzzled expression, as if he were seeing her clearly for the first time in 3 years. Something about her demeanor, her vocabulary, the way she carried herself, it didn't match who he thought she was. "Before anyone calls security," Maya continued, her eyes moving from Patricia to Richard to the Russian delegation, "perhaps someone should ask Mr. Volkov what he's been saying for the past 15 minutes. The suggestion hung in the air like a live wire. Dmitry Volkov's eyebrows rose slightly, and he exchanged a meaningful glance with his assistant. No one at the Sterling Grand was supposed to understand Russian. Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, this is rich. Now the cleaning lady thinks she speaks Russian. What's next? Are you going to tell us you have a degree in international business?" The sarcastic question was meant to be the final humiliation. Instead, it became the moment that changed everything. "Actually," Maya said quietly, "I do." The words fell into the lobby like stones into still water. Patricia's mocking smile froze on her face. Richard's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "I graduated at the top of my class from Northwestern University with a degree in international business and languages," Maya continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I speak 6 languages fluently, including Russian, which I studied for 4 years." The transformation in the lobby's atmosphere was immediate and dramatic. Guests leaned forward, riveted. Hotel staff stared in amazement. Even Volkov's security team seemed more attentive. Patricia looked as though she'd been struck by lightning. Her mouth opened and closed without producing sound. "That's impossible," she finally stammered. "You're a cleaning lady. You can't have, there's no way." "Miss Whitmore," Maya interrupted gently, "would you like me to demonstrate?" Without waiting for permission, Maya turned toward Dmitry Volkov and spoke in fluent Russian, her pronunciation perfect and her grammar impeccable. "Mr. Volkov, I deeply apologize for the unprofessional behavior you have witnessed here today. I understand that you have been expressing concerns about American business culture and the treatment of employees." The effect was instantaneous and electrifying. Volkov's face lit up with genuine surprise and delight. He responded immediately in rapid Russian, his voice animated with interest. "Incredible. Where did you learn to speak Russian so beautifully? Your accent is nearly perfect." The conversation continued in Russian while everyone else stood frozen in various states of shock and disbelief. Patricia's face had gone completely white, and she was gripping the marble counter so tightly her knuckles matched its color. "I studied at Northwestern University and spent a summer in Moscow as part of an exchange program," Maya replied in Russian. "I also worked with Russian immigrants in community assistance programs here in Chicago." Volkov nodded approvingly, then asked a question that was clearly a test. "Tell me, what do you know about energy sector negotiations between Russia and the United States?" Maya paused for just a moment, then launched into a sophisticated analysis that demonstrated not just language skills, but genuine expertise in international business. As she spoke, the expressions around her continued to evolve. Daniel was grinning with undisguised pride. Several guests were whispering to each other with obvious admiration. Hotel staff members stared at Maya as if they'd never seen her before, which, in many ways, they hadn't. But the most dramatic transformation was occurring in Patricia's face. She looked like she was watching her entire reality crumble in real time. When Maya finished her analysis, Dmitry Volkov turned to his assistant and spoke in English for the first time since entering the hotel. "Cancel our arrangements at the Four Seasons. We will conduct our business here after all." The assistant nodded and immediately began making phone calls. Volkov then turned to address the assembled group, his eyes moving from Richard to Patricia before settling on Maya. "In 30 years of international business," he said in careful English, I have learned that the true measure of any organization is not the competence of its leadership, but how it treats its most valuable employees. His gaze shifted to Patricia, and his expression hardened noticeably. For the past 20 minutes, I have watched your assistant manager publicly humiliate the most qualified person in this lobby. She has made assumptions based on prejudice rather than ability. And she has demonstrated exactly the kind of small-minded thinking that destroys business relationships. Patricia's face cycled through shades of red and white as the full implications began to dawn on her. She had been completely wrong about Maya's qualifications, and she had displayed her ignorance in front of a guest whose opinion could make or break careers. Furthermore, Volkov continued, his voice carrying quiet authority, this young lady has demonstrated in 5 minutes what your professional translation services could not accomplish in 2 hours. She has the cultural knowledge, language skills, and business acumen to facilitate complex international negotiations. He paused, letting his words sink in. I will conduct my business with the Sterling Grand Hotel, but I will only work with Miss. He realized he didn't know Maya's name. Rodriguez, Maya supplied quietly. Maya Rodriguez. I will only work with Miss Rodriguez as my translator and cultural liaison, Volkov finished. She appears to be the only person here who understands both the technical aspects of international business and the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect. The lobby fell into stunned silence as the full magnitude of the role reversal became clear. The woman dismissed as an unqualified janitor was now being personally requested by a billionaire client. The assistant manager who had claimed superior education was being dismissed as inadequate. Richard finally found his voice. Miss Rodriguez, he said, his tone completely different from any he had ever used with her before. Would you be willing to assist with Mr. Volkov's business arrangements? All eyes turned to Maya. She looked around the lobby, taking in the faces of people who had ignored her existence for 3 years. She saw Patricia's expression of mounting horror as the assistant manager began to understand the professional consequences of her behavior. And then Maya Rodriguez smiled with quiet confidence and gave the answer that would change everything. I would be honored to help, she said simply. But the most dramatic revelations were still to come. 2 hours later, Maya sat in the Sterling Grand's presidential suite, facilitating negotiations worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She was no longer invisible. She was essential. Dmitry Volkov sat to her right, clearly impressed by her expertise. Across from them were representatives from American energy companies who had arrived expecting routine translation services and found themselves working with someone whose knowledge exceeded their expectations. But before the negotiations had truly begun, Volkov had asked for Patricia to join them. Now the assistant manager sat rigidly in her chair, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. Miss Whitmore, Volkov said, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone delivering judgment, I want to share with you some observations my security team has made about your management style. Patricia's carefully constructed composure began to crack. Mr. Volkov, if there have been any misunderstandings. There have been no misunderstandings, Volkov interrupted. There have been deliberate patterns of discriminatory behavior that my team has documented extensively. He nodded to his assistant, who produced a tablet and began scrolling through a comprehensive report. March 12th. You publicly berated Miss Rodriguez for moving too slowly, despite the fact that she had completed her tasks ahead of schedule. April 18th. You deliberately assigned her to clean the same areas 3 times in 1 day as punishment. May 5th. You instructed other staff members not to socialize with Miss Rodriguez during breaks. With each dated entry, Patricia's face grew paler. The isolated incidents were being transformed into evidence of systematic harassment. But today's behavior, Volkov continued, his voice taking on barely controlled anger, represented an escalation that crossed every line of professional decency. You publicly humiliated a qualified professional based solely on racist assumptions about her intelligence and capabilities. Patricia finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Mr. Volkov, I was under tremendous stress. The crisis was entirely preventable. Volkov cut her off ruthlessly. For 3 years, you have had a Northwestern University graduate with specialized knowledge in exactly the areas you needed today. Instead of recognizing her qualifications, you systematically suppressed them because they didn't fit your narrow-minded assumptions about who deserves respect. Richard stepped forward, knowing he had to take responsibility. Mr. Volkov, I take full accountability for any management failures. Changes will be made, Volkov replied. But they will be changes that reflect justice, not just damage control. He leaned forward, his voice becoming quieter but somehow more powerful. Miss Whitmore, real power isn't about humiliating people who can't fight back. Real power is about recognizing talent wherever it exists and creating opportunities for people to excel, regardless of what they look like or where they started. Patricia's breathing had become shallow and rapid. She was experiencing the complete collapse of everything she had believed about her own importance. You have spent 3 years wielding petty authority over someone whose capabilities exceed your own, whose educational credentials match yours, and whose character clearly surpasses anything you've demonstrated. You have wasted extraordinary human potential because of your own insecurities and prejudices. The silence that followed was absolute. Therefore, Volkov continued, I am making my position clear. I will not conduct business with any establishment that employs Miss Whitmore in any management capacity. Furthermore, I will be sharing my security team's documentation with other international business leaders who frequent Chicago hotels. The threat was clear and devastating. Patricia's reputation in the hospitality industry was being destroyed in real time, and everyone understood her career was effectively over. Patricia's composure finally shattered. Tears began streaming down her face. Please, she whispered. I have a mortgage, responsibilities. I never meant for things to go this far. You never meant to get caught, Maya said quietly. But you meant every word you said, every humiliation you inflicted, every assumption you made about my worth as a human being. Miss Rodriguez is correct, Volkov said. Your apologies now are motivated by consequences, not conscience. Richard knew he had to make a decision that would determine the hotel's future. Miss Whitmore, he said, his voice heavy with authority, your employment with the Sterling Grand is terminated immediately. As security escorted Patricia from the room, Volkov turned to Maya. What just happened wasn't revenge. It was accountability. There's an important difference. Maya nodded, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had never wanted to destroy Patricia's career, but she recognized that justice sometimes requires consequences. Now, Volkov continued, let's discuss your future. Volkov Industries is prepared to offer you a position as Senior Director of Cross-Cultural Business Development, with a starting salary of $300,000 annually, plus equity participation in our American operations. The number was so far beyond anything Maya had imagined that she struggled to process it. $300,000 was more than 10 times what she'd been earning. Furthermore, Volkov added, we will establish a scholarship fund in your name at Northwestern University for students from underrepresented backgrounds pursuing careers in international relations. Your story will inspire others who have been overlooked. Maya felt tears forming in her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy and relief and vindication. 6 months later, Maya stood in her corner office on the 40th floor of a Chicago skyscraper, looking out at a view that included the Sterling Grand far below. Her transformation had been complete and extraordinary. Her mother's cancer treatment had been successful, funded by excellent health insurance. They now lived in a comfortable home with a garden. Daniel had joined her team, bringing his integrity to her growing operation. The scholarship fund bearing her name had already provided full rides to 15 deserving students. Patricia, meanwhile, had never recovered from her public humiliation. She eventually found work at a small motel chain, earning in a year less than Maya now made in a month. But the most satisfying aspect wasn't the money or prestige, or even the vindication. It was knowing that her success had opened doors for others who had been overlooked and underestimated. Her story had become a symbol of hope. At industry conferences, Maya was frequently asked about the lessons of her experience. Her answer was always the same. True success isn't about proving your worth to people who refuse to see it. True success is building something so meaningful that their recognition becomes irrelevant. The Sterling Grand still operated under new management that had implemented comprehensive diversity programs. They had even offered Maya a consulting contract to train their staff. She had accepted, not from revenge, but from a genuine commitment to ensuring no one else would endure what she had experienced. On quiet evenings, Maya sometimes thought about the cruel irony of her journey. Patricia had tried to humiliate her into invisibility and had instead created the exact circumstances that forced her talents into the light. The woman who had meant to destroy her had inadvertently become the architect of her greatest success. It was, Maya often reflected, the sweetest possible form of justice. Not because it had destroyed an enemy, but because it had built something beautiful from the ashes of injustice. In the end, the most powerful lesson wasn't about the triumph of good over evil. It was about the unstoppable force of human potential when it finally finds the recognition and opportunity it deserves. Maya's story became a reminder that dignity and talent can never be permanently suppressed, no matter how hard others try to make us invisible. Her journey taught us that sometimes the most challenging moments in our lives are preparing us for our greatest breakthroughs. She showed us that true strength doesn't come from seeking revenge against those who hurt us, but from building something so beautiful and meaningful that their recognition becomes irrelevant. Her transformation from invisible hotel janitor to international business leader proves that our worth is never determined by how others see us, but by how we see ourselves and what we choose to do with our gifts. The most profound power any person can possess is the quiet confidence to remain true to their values, even when the world seems determined to break their spirit. What strikes me most about Maya's story is how she turned years of humiliation into wisdom, years of invisibility into preparation, and years of being underestimated into unstoppable strength. She didn't just change her own life. She opened doors for countless others who had been overlooked and forgotten. And the question I want to leave you with today is this. Have you ever felt invisible in your workplace or school? Have you ever been judged by your appearance rather than your abilities? Have you ever wondered if your talents would ever be recognized? Maya's story reminds us that our current circumstances don't define our future possibilities. The seed of greatness inside you cannot be killed by someone else's prejudice. It can only wait patiently for its moment to bloom. If this story touched your heart and gave you hope, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Your simple act of sharing could be the encouragement that changes someone's life. Remember, you are not invisible. You are not less than. You are not defined by what others believe about you. You are defined by what you know to be true about yourself. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe has a way of making sure that truth finally comes to light. Thank you for listening to Maya's story.